What's happening, viewers and listeners? Welcome to episode 7 of the Coffee with Sam podcast. Oh, that was hot. Oh. In this episode, I talked to Deborah Fields about how you should approach and look at coaching athletes with autism or learning difficulties. So grab your brew, sit back and relax on YouTube, or grab your water, download the audio, and head on out for that isolation exercise walk. Roll that intro.
Morning.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Look, my hair's coming on well, look.
Yes. What did you do in the end?
I even got Alex she's even faded it like the hairdressers. First ever haircut.
But a lot of people find it really difficult, but actually lots of people are really good at a lot of things. What they're frightened of is having a go because they're frightened of the consequence. And of course, you cannot take the place of a hairdresser. Like, it's years of training, this, that, and the other if you want to try that. Actually, if you've got someone who's pretty good with their hands, they understand that I'm going to do that up to there, then I'm going to take a slightly different. People are pretty good. We're just frightened.
We had some info from my barber, and he said, do this, like the simplest way. And then I just kept going to the mirror and checking it. And then we're going to do it again. We've got a few bits to clean up, but you are seeing some bad hairdos like when you go shopping and stuff, when you go out for your weekly shopping, some bad, just one levels.
I can't bear my hair. As I said, I feel like an 80-year-old grandma at the moment, but because it's got to grow. Like, I'm waiting for it to grow after chemo. I was completely bald this time last year. So, I mean, not just bald. Not like I shaved my head. It was completely. It was sort of here. It was all pink, and my hair's been pink and lilac-y for the last 15, 20 years, like long before people were doing it. It's really trendy, isn't it, to go pale grey and pinks and all sorts of stuff. But again, there's lots of bad colour jobs out there and stuff. It's all learning, isn't it?
How
Learn by mistake.
No, flight school you were bald, weren't you?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, I remember.
Completely. Yeah. And it's not just bald. People don't get it. It's not that you've got hair and you've taken it off. There is no hair. So there's no hair on your face, all that fuzzy bits that lots of people are trying to shave off so they do their makeup better, or just the little hairs in your nose or your ears, all the stuff that protects you. And even the hairs on your arms that keep you a little bit warmer, everything is gone. So it's not you've had a shave and you can feel stubble on your leg or something. It's fallen out from the actual root of the hair. So there's just nothing. So you don't have I shaved my head when I came back. I think it was my second or third chemo. Someone said to me, "Is your hair coming out yet?" We were on a phone call and I said, "Don't think so." And I put my fingers in my hair because I'd cut it short. I'd sort of like half shaved the sides and had it cut short. Put my hands in it and I just pulled out this handful of hair and I went, oh, maybe it is. And then I tested on the other side and it was. And they came over and there's a few of us here. And I literally they went, "Oh, you're okay?" And I went, "Yeah, got to be done." I just knelt over and just did a number one over the whole of my head. Ready. Because that was the only way to do it. Put it in a Sainsbury's bag, nice bright orange Sainsbury's bag, and just went, "Wow, okay." And the person who I was on the phone to just sort of like did the back of my head as well, just to help me out a bit, because they're male and very used to clippers. And it was like, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend that I know what that feels like. I can imagine it's a bit of a weird time, but
I think it depends how you identify yourself. So how you are socially and how you feel recognized and how you balance with other people. So if you, like, my hair really matters to me in that everyone knows me as that woman with slightly pink and lilac faded hair that pulls forward. Although growing up, they'd have known me with curly hair because I've got naturally curly hair. So there's something about me, though, as a response to it that definitely wants to grow my hair quite long. And then what I might do is really sort of like bleach it and fade it from a pale pink into a purple eventually. But it damages your hair so badly as well because you have to bleach it and eventually stops your hair from growing and it causes a lot of damage.
Yeah, I think this is the first week I've actually seen your hair, Deb. Every other week it's been straight back with the lightener, the toner. Yeah. I've been using that toner stuff.
And is it working? It looks like it is.
Yeah. It's just it's the back here, but yeah, it's not as ginger. It's more of a dark blonde now
Yeah.
on the back and the top.
Yes. So it does take away the red. That's what it does. So there's loads of good colour restores and stuff. You can do that. And the key as well to bleaching, a lot of people lose their hair, she says, after having been to a very good hairdresser, is we tend to bleach too late or too soon. So around sort of like what this hairdresser was telling me, around 6 weeks is what you just want to do, is just the roots. If you leave it any longer, you get this overlapping system, apparently, according to hairdressers. What do I know? And then that's when you bleach, like you do it every 9 or 10 or 12 weeks. And that's when some of it breaks off. So it's quite, you have to do it quite regularly on the roots.
Oh yeah, 'cause I suppose if you put it on the roots, that's fresh, but then you're putting it on the rest of the hair that's not fresh, so it's just doubling up, doubling up, doubling up. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So they say put it on the roots every 6 weeks, then fade it out and then wash it out, something along those lines. But as again, not a qualified hairdresser, ask your barber. But
We've
it is
brought people a good 5 minutes of hair advice again this week. Like we're bringing all sorts of knowledge on this podcast.
Yeah,
So this week we have a question from a viewer slash listener, and it is: do you approach kids with special needs such as autism, ADHD differently for training or competition? He has a child that competes in a sport, and he sometimes can get everything. He can't get everything. So on competition days, he will do what he needs to do, but some days he will still just have a meltdown.
Yeah.
So
So it's a very simple answer. It's yes and no. Sorry about that, but it is yes and no, because so like let's talk about the sort of mental health illnesses, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to cover autism. Like I'll cover that as a main one today. People can ask about other things. You are very likely to see. So I did a talk yesterday, about a half-hour talk as part of Kenny and Lisa's Blossom to kids about how to deal with a crisis. And, you know, at the moment in America, for example, 1 in 100 mental health issues, 1 in 100 people have anxiety. So you're in your gym, on average, you're going to see an awful lot of anxiety. Maybe not properly, you know, a lot of people say I've got anxiety. A lot of people's parents say they've got anxiety, but actually they haven't had it properly clinically diagnosed. And a lot of people do the same with depression and other things. So in your gym, you are likely to see some mental health issues. I think, ironically, 1 in 100 people also have some form of autism aspect or on the autistic spectrum. So 1 in 100. So if you have 100 kids in your gym, you are likely to see autism. If you have 100 kids in your gym, especially more female, 1 in 11 on average self-harm. So you have at least 10 self-harmers, if not more, 9, anywhere between 8 and 11 self-harmers.
that's a horrific statistic.
Yeah, and it's also unrealistic, because when I deal with children, if I'm working with a child who self-harms, not some people don't know. I mean, I have different moral obligations and duties and safeguarding and different things. That's not relevant to this bit. But some people haven't known that they've been self-harming for months, for years, or whatever. And parents and coaches can overreact, causing quite serious issues as well. So you're getting an awful lot of self-harmers. You know, anorexia is on the increase. If you look at the image that people want to have and how it works. So I used to be a clinical supervisor and a training director of an eating disorders clinic in London. And it's a complex issue to work with. Anorexia is such a killer. It's still the biggest killer of mental health for young women, and suicide is the biggest for younger men. So, you know, we are clearly we're not dealing with mental health issues very well in this country. We've got CAMS, we've got other things. They're overrun. They can't deal with it. A lot of people in CAMS are social workers who are taught how to deal with mental health, but they're not trained in mental health, not in the way that your psychologist, your psychotherapist, your counselor, or your psychiatrist are. So they all do different things, those people at different levels, but that's our training. So there's a difference there, and that's really tough, because and the social care network has a very different approach. They come from safeguarding, got to do the right thing, whereas you find your psychologists and your psychiatrists and psychotherapists have safeguarding, but they also come from beneficence, what is better for this person right now. And I think that's where coaches have to come from, beneficence. What is the best move right here, right now? So you're going to see kids with anxiety, stress, they might have domestic violence at home, that's quite high. You will see a percentage of children that have been abused, and have some kind of trauma. So that might be physical, emotional, sexual. You might not know that, you know, so-and-so is homeless, or so-and-so comes. And so many, you don't know a lot of these things, and that's the problem. So what we need from parents, if you're running a gym, what we need as human beings is for parents to tell us what's going on, and or the child to tell us what's going on, which is why it's so important in your gym to promote talking. Makes a difference. However, with autism, that might be slightly different. So do you know what autism is? Do you understand autism at all, like you as a human being and as a gymnast and a cheerleader and a human being?
No, I've actually got a niece who's got it.
Okay.
But I think when it's family, I've never looked into it because I just see her as she's. Do you know what I mean? I don't see that she's got autism as such.
It's her.
Um, yeah, it's just
Yeah.
who she is.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I'm not going to pretend that I do know, to be honest.
No, and I think people don't. But however, I think what you've just said is really important, because that's really important too. But that's the yes and the no. I think it's really important to see a human being as a human being. And sometimes it's also a good idea to understand some of the situations that they're in, go through, suffer from, so we can make their environment more friendly for them. If you've got someone who has some kind of issue, mental health issue, or anything else as well, or physical issue, disabilities, different things. And there's a slight difference here, because autism isn't a mental health issue, it's a developmental disability. So that's slightly different to having a mental health issue. However, people with autism can have mental health issues. They can have different things that go along with it as well. So they might have learning disabilities, mental health issues, they might need different forms of support, especially as a lot of people don't know how to handle autism. Some people say, Jesus, that kid's having a meltdown. Actually, they're not. They've got autism. That's why. And then some parents might say, well, what do you expect me to do? They've got autism. Well, actually, you can still do something. There's a balance between all of those. So it's a spectrum condition. So it can go from over here to over here, like one of those old clapometers. And people can be anywhere. So while some people on the spectrum may share certain aspects that are similar, they're all pretty different, and it affects them in different ways. So everyone with autism is different, the same as you and I are, in our own way as well. And lots of people have maybe heard of Asperger's or Asperger's, pronounce it how you want. You can make your own call there. That is also another form of autism. And someone with Asperger's is way more likely to be higher on the good old intellectual scale as well. They've got above average intelligence on average. But what a lot of people have, the similarity is about processing language, communication. It's about learning. It's a little bit more complex, and people might have dyslexia and dyspraxia that might go along with it. And dyslexia is trouble with reading, and dyspraxia is trouble awareness of space and how people are. So as I said, it's quite a few people as well. It's 1 in 100, and it affects everybody in every way. There isn't, so on average, when you look at it, although there is over a 40% increase in eating disorders in men, it is quite a female, white, middle class issue. That doesn't mean that other people don't get it when it comes to eating disorders. But however, there are certain aspects, whereas with autism, across the spectrum completely, so everybody can get it in some way, shape or form. So what you've got with autism is, what you'll find is, it's about social communication and social interaction. So it can be, how do I talk to someone? How do I hear and process information? How do I get what they're saying on their face? I don't understand what it is that they're saying, because they process differently. I say they, this is some of the time, not all of the time. So there's a difference in processing. So social communication, social interaction. It can also be, a lot of people who've read about autism or seen a film with someone who's autistic, and you see things like repetitive patterns of behavior, keeping a very strict regime in place to make the person feel safe. So that's there. And it's also how people process the sensory information around them, so about different things. So all of those things come into it. So again, verbal, non-verbal communication, that makes a difference. Small talk and banter. You have a laugh with someone, you go, shut up, oh my God, did you see that? And an autistic person may just look at you and go, don't get it, nothing, don't get it. And you've got to remember that when it comes to a gym, small talk, banter, a little bit of bullying sometimes, because banter can drift into bullying fairly easily, different things. Small talk develops relationships, friendships, makes you part of a team. And if somebody is more on the spectrum than someone else, they might not be able to do that. So, and they're scared, they might get misread, judged, misrepresented. They'll say something that's completely inappropriate or overreact. I saw a little boy for a long time who was nearly expelled from school for reacting quite violently to something that somebody else did. Somebody poked him in the ribs very hard. He reacted in a certain way, and it was quite extreme. And this other boy was hurt, and he was nearly expelled. And no one said anything about the autistic spectrum when he came to see me. But when he sat with me, and I was like, this child was 13 at the time. It's clearly very high functioning, very clever, but look at all these traits. And I remember talking to mum saying, do you recognize any of these sort of things if I say them? She's like, yeah, did that, yeah. And it was so obvious that he was on the spectrum. But this incredible family, high functioning, done really well, but these little bits of behavior that poked through caused no end of issues. And I saw him for quite a while. He learned about emotions. He was very low on the spectrum, however it was there, and he's done brilliantly. So he's gone. So from me, so he's gone on and done really well. And he didn't do sports and didn't do football bits and pieces because of this sort of stuff. So what about that could impact a gym is really important. So you've got to remember, most of what we do is verbal. We, on the extreme end of autism, somebody won't even speak. It feels like everything is flooding their senses. It's all too noisy and it's all too much and it's all too painful. And communication can be a problem if that feels like that person's trapped in that. And we don't really know what's happened or why. Genetics, environment, all sorts of stuff. And you can't really tell if someone's got it from looking at them. That's the other thing. No, like, okay. Also, what's interesting, the ratio is 5-1 about gender. So for every 5 boys that are diagnosed in the UK, 1 girl is diagnosed. So it's less likely, but it's also less recognised in women, because on average, the way women are brought up is to cope more. I'm really sorry to talk about genders and do huge generalities, but often, maybe not now so much, but often it's been the girl has to cope, she has to help, she has to do this, she has to do that. Sometimes the boys don't. And I really understand that that's changing in life. But that alone, that teaching. So a lot of girls aren't diagnosed with autism until they're adults. It comes a lot later.
Oh.
A lot later. I have an autistic man in his 30s. I have an autistic woman in her 20s, both diagnosed. And as I said, I've just let go of an autistic boy. That's not defining them. I'm just defining what they've got. So that's not the way I see them. And I can't use their names. So that's the way I see them. Their names, they're human.
Does it change with age?
It can do, depending on where they are on the spectrum, because what they've done is that it's not that the autism itself necessarily changes, it's that they've learned how to deal with life and how to deal with people. So thinking of the guy in his 30s, so if you were to sit with him in a pub, you might think, I wonder, you might do. When he sits with me, I absolutely know, because I'll get he's got a list of things that are very specific about what he wants to talk about. What do I do here? Is this right? Is this wrong? What do I say about here? I want to say this. Would this be wrong? And sometimes the answer is, it would be really wrong. Don't say that ever in public. So it's things like that. It's the understanding. So the more he sees me, the more he learns what's acceptable and what isn't to say. So, somebody on the spectrum can come across as rude or disinterested or too much, or saying something you think, why would you say that?
Yeah.
It's quite hard. And like there's a lot of banter in the gym, isn't there? If you can't banter, what do you do?
Yeah. So have you ever come across athletes with autism, and how would you deal with that? So say like, what we talked about a lot of the symptoms, what we talked about in the last podcast, really, like going through the anxiety, going through the fear, scared before comp. How would you deal with someone on the spectrum to someone who's not on the spectrum?
Right. So what you've got to remember is someone who's more severely on the spectrum rather than somebody who's quite lightly on the spectrum. Everything matters when it comes to communication. So it could be physical boundaries. Don't come too close or come closer, like really uncomfortable. Empathy, not going to get it. A lot of people, some people with autism will not understand empathy. They just don't get it. They also don't look in your eyes a lot. Some of them, some of the time, there's a lot of a lack of eye contact. It's a lot like this, looking around. So people could be on the spectrum. And yes, I have dealt with athletes on the spectrum. Reciprocal conversation isn't there. So that's another issue, you know, that normally you say something, you expect something back. Formal language comes into this. So a lot of people with autism are very formal in their language because they've learned it. And they're also going to have a very interesting interpretation of language, the way it's used. So I'm told to do this, I've got to do that. How do I do that? So if you take an extreme example, so when we say something to somebody, okay, look, you need to get it into your head, right? Let's say we say something like, you've got to get this into your head. Someone who's severely on the spectrum will say, okay. And for the whole of that football game, or for the whole of that next routine, they're going to be thinking, how do I put this in my head? Because that's what the coach told me to do. What do I do? Do I swallow it? Do I drill it through? Literal conversation. So that really changes too, because what some people, and also tone of voice, that person's really angry at me. No, they're not. It's a tone of voice. All of those things come into it. Plus change. People don't like change who are on the spectrum a lot. So how can that help? How can we work with someone along those lines? What you've got to think of is that a lot of people on the spectrum will take your tone of voice, your eye contact, all of those things in different ways. And it's not, oi, look at me, or whatever, like really inappropriate sometimes. But it could be that you turn around and you say, like whoever the person is, hey, John, you all right? Catch their eye. Gentle, soft, slow, tone of voice, different. Because what a lot of athletes can't do who are on the spectrum is they can't do hypothetical thinking. I need you to think about this. Well, what will happen if you do that? Well, what will happen if you drop it? And they'll just go, don't know. You need to tell them. You need to say, if you do this, and then this happens, and then this happens, these are the 2 or 3 possibilities that are going to happen, and this is the possibility that we want. So in order to get that possibility, this is what we're going to do. And then you need to inform them. So you might get a parent who hassles you, say exactly what's happening, what are we going to do, at what time, and you might get annoyed as a coach. But that parent could also be on the spectrum. That in order to feel safe, I need to know exactly what's happening, because a lot of people who are on the spectrum will have some form of anxiety because they're so scared about getting it right and getting it wrong that they're really worried about what's going to happen.
So just a bit like you have to do, which is the hardest part of coaching a team sport, you just have to treat everyone as an individual.
Yeah,
So
slightly.
some athletes you would shout at, some athletes you'd be nice to. I've had athletes say to me, why don't you praise me enough? And I say, because you don't actually work hard enough if I praise you. If I don't praise you, you work harder. As soon as I start to praise you, you will drop your level of intensity to how hard you're training. And they're like, oh, and
I will praise you at the other end.
Yeah.
When you're there. And because the other thing you've got to remember when it comes to autism and, you know, training and different things is single focus. So in cheer, we're asking for quite a lot of focus. I want you to think about what tumble's coming. I want you to think about, let's say you're a base. I want you to think about how you're about to hold that person to make sure you've got a proper grip. I want you to make sure you're in the right place and that grip's in the right place so it's not illegal. We don't want illegality. Like that's a hell of a ton of points missed for no good reason whatsoever, unless it's a performance issue. You want this person to think about whether that person's safe. You want them to think about the space around them, or if they're a fly, you know, it depends. Like they've got to think about everyone's got to think about their face, what they're doing. Everyone's got to think about the music being in time. Everyone's got to think about getting the move right, legalities, making sure that everyone is safe around them. That is a hell of a lot of focus. And people are on the spectrum find it some of the time. Again, you've got to look at the person you're dealing with. So this is just some of the time. What you've got to look at is single focus. If if you've got someone who's more heavily on the spectrum, so like if you're starting to go into SCN or different levels, because we've got different teams, haven't we?
Yep.
But if you've got someone who's on just your general team over here, single focus is really important. So ask them, just concentrate on this, focus on this, because actually the rest will probably happen and they'll be okay. But they have some people on the spectrum will turn around and tell you they have single focus attention. And if they have single focus attention, concentrating on everything else around means that's not going to happen. And all of a sudden the person's on the floor. Or if it's, so for example, if you've always got a stunt, if you've got someone who's basing, it might be better for them to be in a certain position all the time when they're basing, rather than swapping and changing with a different stunt. Or it might be better to say that they're maybe the back base and they always hold in a certain way because of that's going on. So they're always doing something slightly different, but very similar, rather than switch, 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 switch. I don't know what I'm doing.
Is autism is it, I don't say, not a birth defect? Is it something you are born with more than a condition that you can get over time?
Well, okay, there's many arguments about this at the moment. So that we're not, researchers are absolutely investigating and finding out what's happening with this, because it's a combination of factors so far that we're aware of, and that is that it is genetic and it is environmental, and the environmental aspects can account for the changes in brain development, because that's there as well. And sometimes what you've got to remember is, I said, it's hidden. So a lot of women they're diagnosed later. It's not because they've never had it and all of a sudden it's there. It's because they've hidden it brilliantly for a very long time. So like the little boy I'm talking about who came to me at 13, left me at 15, was very, no one ever knew. But when I turned around and said, okay, can I just ask this, and this, as far as developmental skills go, friendships, personalities, routines, bedroom habits, when I went through this, she was like, well, he's done all of those. And it was like, okay. Now, I'm not allowed to diagnose. And I said to her, go and get him diagnosed and go and see what you think. But of course, getting someone diagnosed, getting the right sort of responses that you need aren't always out there. And he didn't need a diagnosis because he wasn't right over here on the spectrum. But in order to understand him and work with him, if I can consider that spectrum is there and that is him and it is part of him. So what we did for the first months and months actually was, his mum was in all the sessions, because it was all about psychoeducation. It was all about understanding and processing and going back. And then eventually he was in the sessions by himself. We did that change. And then last summer when I had cancer, I changed all my flooring. I warned him. I said to him, next time when you come in this room, instead of a wooden floor, there's going to be more of a stone looking floor, tiles, and it's going to feel different and be different. How would you like us to handle that? What would you like me to do about that? Because it is going to be different. And he was like, oh, okay. I'm really glad you've told me. What sort of color is it? And I said, well, it's already in my kitchen. Let's go in my kitchen. Let's go and have a look. And he went, okay. And he touched it. He touched the floor. So the sensory differences are different. So that can be about touch. It can be sight, sound, smell. It can be about taste. It can be about personal body awareness, or it can even be about balance. They're your main senses. So to him, it was really important. He had a look and he went, oh, okay, I can deal with that. And when he walked in, I mean, if I even moved the slightest thing, he would say, that's different.
So a bit more aware of what's going on than just going into a room.
Completely. And the person to absolutely trust, because in some respects, the positivity of that, the strength, oh my God, the problem solving skills. You want attention to detail in a routine, or you want someone to really get the problems ironed out, or you want the person who's really reliable to say, you're doing that wrong. There's your person. Without a doubt. Great at that. Great attention to detail. So, and this isn't, and again, everyone's different. This is just some of it, some of the time. So they're also very reliable and loyal. They're very unlikely to leave you. They're very, again, I'm using they as a generalism. I can't change this conversation. So it isn't everyone all the time, just when you need to do that. So, people on the spectrum are very conscientious, very committed, very loyal, and really want to work and get on and do well. So using that as a positive is fantastic. Remember as well, though, if from a sensual perspective, senses perspective, when you're talking about hearing, really loud music and really different things, like, oh, I can't deal with that. So there's those things as well. So actually sometimes, it can even be a good idea if you've got someone quite heavily on the spectrum to say, let's just buy you some very light earbud type things to put in your ears so that it's not as loud, because let's face it, cheer is loud.
And is that just, so does the loud thing come in with that they can't then focus on their one thing that they need to focus on, because there's something drowning that out, and it's I can't focus on cheer because of how loud it is?
Well, it's because it's different. So you've got to work out what that means. So they might be fine if it's really loud, and they might not. Or it might be in competition, there's too much stimulus going on around them. So it's about focus in, talk to me. So let's say this Jonathan that I've made up. John, focus in, talk here. Because I'll be doing this, because it's all confusing and bewildering. And actually can be quite disturbing and upsetting sometimes. So you might get some rocking and different things going on, again, depending on where they are.
Yeah, where they are. Yeah. So going on this listener's question, it sounds like their child isn't this end of the scale. It's more, he mentioned ADHD too. So that's down the lower end of the autism scale.
Well, it's connected to autism. So you might see related conditions. So autism may or may not be diagnosed, but it's often diagnosed alongside ADHD. It can be diagnosed with other things as well. So you'll get a real myriad of different things. So like I said, I think I mentioned dyslexia and dyspraxia. I've already mentioned what else have I mentioned? Oh, any form of anxiety. There are different things that can happen. So
that's where I was going to go with that question, Deb, is if it's not like noises and all that type of thing, because they're down the end where you can't see it, would you deal with it the same as we spoke about dealing with anxiety? And say you got to a competition, or they were at any competition, so maybe it's not noise, it's a competition without noise, or so it's not loud, but that the parents gone through all their normal stuff, but something's just spooked them and had a meltdown.
Well, yeah, so you could do, but again, it's about the individual. So you need to find out what it is, because if for them it's social communication or social interaction in some way, putting them out there to deal with a lot of people isn't going to help either. It might not even be nice, small talk, banter, literal thinking. So it is a question of planning. What is it you will need from me when we go somewhere when things are going to change? What do you want from me? What will make you feel safe? And sometimes you just have to watch the literal discussion. Come on, guys, you've got this. Have I? What have I got? What do I do now? I haven't got it. What is it I've got? Like literal thinking. So you have to work out what your person, the human being in front of you, has or processes slightly different to the other human beings in front of you. Now, to an extent, a team will all process things differently, because all human beings do. And we all like different things in different ways. We have different things that talk to us. The way we learn, the way we function, the way we think are all really different. But if you've got somebody who maybe struggles with empathy and someone's really upset, they're not going to get it, are they? And, you know, you've got everyone really excited afterwards and everyone's going, oh my God, I can't believe we won. Or, oh my God, I can't believe we did so badly. And you've got the person with autism going, well, I did all right. I think I did quite well there. I'm really glad that happened.
Yeah, not feeling that whole.
Yeah. And so you've got to find out what is it that human being feels and has and how they work, and then work out a little bit of a plan between you and the parents together. Now, I'm also going to have a little bit of a go in a very loving, kind way at parents right now. A lot of parents of kids will be overprotective and not want them exposed to anything. And that's not healthy either, because I mean, depending on the spectrum as well. If you've got someone right over here, this is not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting about children on the lower end of the spectrum. So if you've got a child on the lower end of the spectrum, actually some exposure creates some tolerance, because they learn that they can handle it. If you've got a parent who says, well, what do you expect of them? They've got autism. What do you want from them? They've got autism. I don't deal with that. They've got autism. That becomes an excuse instead of how can we work with this child and help them feel okay in and of themselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not seen. So, and actually, having a go at that parent, it's got nothing to do with autism, has it? Because how many times as a coach have you had a parent come up to you and say, my child needs this, and they don't? Or how many times have you been away with kids? Like if you go to Worlds, or if you go to Summit, or if you go to NCA and you take a group of kids abroad, the amount of parents that come up to you and say, my child needs this is the list, they've got to do that, they take this tablet, they need this, they've got to do that, and they won't eat this, and they won't drink that, and they don't drink water, or they don't do this. They do now, because and it's really interesting, and they don't need a lot of what we do, because I'm a parent, believe me, I have overprotected my kids, but what children need is some exposure to not okayness. They need exposure to failure. They need exposure to coping mechanisms. So when that emotional wave rides up and we're like, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, actually, yeah, I can. I'm all right now. It's going. But what we tend to do as parents and as human beings is we cut the crest of that wave off completely near the top, so that that child doesn't develop the skills to tolerate distress. Oh, you okay? Have an iPad. Oh, you're not all right. Want a drink? Oh, do you want some food? Oh, I'll buy it for you. Maybe not. And it's the same when our child is on a spectrum, or our child isn't okay, or a child has a physical or a mental disability or a mental illness or a physical illness, whatever they've got, expect more from them, because they're incredible. Human beings are incredible. So try not to overprotect your child. Sometimes it's a good thing that they learn a little bit of distress tolerance. Everything is within balance. So what I'm saying is you have to understand what's going on for the child as a coach and help them develop distress tolerance. So sometimes just thinking about how you deal with them and what you do.
So say this is like an individual sport. We keep talking about team sport. Would it be the same, get the same effects, and would you have to do the same, take the same protocols of approach and trying to focus in on something?
Well, people with autism can develop an intense interest and passion about one thing, be that an individual or a team sport or reading or different things as well. So again, especially if they have Asperger's, they're very intelligent as well and will probably go for that. So an individual sport seems quite a natural choice, but actually learning to play in a team, learning to do something a little bit different is really good. There's nothing wrong with individual sports either. That's really important as well. But that will just promote that individuality. Whereas working in a team sport, you've got to think about what that person needs. Do I overload them with information or just give them this next bit? I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. This is the way it is. You're part of this team. This is what you've got to learn to do. But I mean, the best advice for someone with autism, keep it clear, keep it basic. That's it. Planned, clear, basic.
Awesome. So would the, like the focusing we talked about last week about the anxiety, would any of that work? So
again, that's what I was trying to answer. I was saying it depends on the child, or it depends on the athlete. Because, for example, if you do something like a 5-4-3-2-1 method and you imagine lots of tastes and smells, that might be too much and too confusing. And then it takes all their senses in, which they're not good at. It might just be good that they focus on breathing in for 4 and breathing out for 7. Simple, basic. Squeezing their bottom. Don't do anything else. Just squeeze your bottom. Like, that's it. Notice, tell me if you can see any red around the room. So again, go more basic. Can you see any purple around the room? Yes, keep them here. So keep things more basic if they're feeling stressed and anxious.
awesome. So so probably just before about to go and compete or whatever they're doing, maybe this parent could be not making things worse, but by trying to cope to a list of things that they think the child needs, maybe is a bit too much.
I'm a parent. I made things worse. Of course I did. So will you, if you ever become a parent, if that's the road you want to go down. So will everyone else. Because what people don't realize is if you say my child needs all of these things and they really need some help, sometimes just backing off. I think I told you the story of a lad I was working with quite a while ago, long time ago. He was on stage and we were doing a show. I was working with lots of kids on how to bring them out themselves with shows and different things. So it had children who were very capable. All of my daughters were in these shows. They could all sing. And my kids are like the Von Trapps. We can sing in harmonies. It's a nightmare. My mum's family were brought up like that. So were us. So were we. Us. So were we. So, put us in a car and start singing a musical. You've got a 3-part harmony going on. It's all really boring. And everyone who sits with us just goes, what's going on? Because you are literally sitting with the Von Trapps from The Sound of Music. And my mum's family are like that as well. So, we put these shows on. So I had really capable people in it. And as far as singing is concerned, and maybe not so capable people as far as singing is concerned, or really capable people as far as drama was concerned. Everybody had like a costume made and different things. And this lad was standing on the stage and he was struggling. He had Tourette's slightly as well. And I watched some of the tics start to develop because he couldn't remember his poem, what he was about to say. He was just saying a poem. And I was sitting next to his mum and I felt his mum get to go up and I put my hand on her knee and I said, as his parent, I would want to get up right now, but you've got to trust me. And started to tick. his head started to flicker a little bit. And I was like, oh God, please, come on. And he started saying his poem with some tears in his eyes. And I started crying. Mum started crying. I could cry now thinking about it. He said his poem, his head was held up high, not a tick, not a swear word, nothing. And he was brilliant.
But
He was
normally,
awesome.
at home or when he was younger, his mom would have then
Intervened at that moment.
yeah, and then he would have been like, "Oh yeah, I just can't do it." Whereas he had to get through it, and he got
Yeah.
himself through it. Yeah,
And don't get me wrong, it's very painful, 40 to 50 seconds. It was incredibly painful. And then when he done that, he got this biggest roar. Like these crowds were always supportive. I did one of these shows every year for all sorts of kids. And whatever, you know, they would have 50, 60, 70 kids in sometimes, you know, people say, oh, they can't sing that. You know, if I did Christina Aguilera's Beautiful, like with a 3-part harmony, you can't teach those kids to sing that. Watch me. Yeah, I can. And we did. But then when we came off, like I wasn't any parents in the dressing room for a while. I spoke to these kids afterwards and I said, right, this is about to happen. This is what's going to happen. Very basic. And I grabbed him and I said, your mum is going to come in and say all these things. But for me, the most important thing that's just happened is you learn to push through something. I'm really proud of you. Well done. She goes, oh my God, you're brilliant. They all come in, they love them. Because that's what we do, don't we? We do it in cheer as well. Like you watch your kid come off and you go, oh my God, you're like a goddess or a god. You're so incredible. I love you. And I see the opposite. Like when a child comes off crying, sometimes if I'll grab them and say, right, okay, the parent wants to come over and console. I'm not consoling. Part of me is, but I'm helping them through that emotional wave so they can learn distress tolerance. Whereas what the parent wants to do is just give them a hug and make it all okay. But what does your child do if they don't get a hug? So we have to teach. And that kid, by the way, went up to Edinburgh University in the ended up on the bloody debating society. Awesome. Awesome human. Like if we just give children slightly different options and different choices, and he was in loads of these shows and they all helped him develop, and he loved his music and he also plays in a band. Like everything developed for him because he wasn't stunted. And cheer doesn't stunt people, it allows them to grow. That's what it'll do here, working as part of a team, whether you're autistic or whatever else you've got. You know, if someone calls you, if you've got a kid who's self-harming and another kid says, what's that? That kid will have to interact and have to say, and then maybe they'll start talking, because it will show with some of the uniforms that are around, depending on where they self-harm, for example. Or, you know, if somebody's losing too much weight, another kid might say, I'm really worried about you. You look like you're going to snap. Whereas an adult would never say that. You know, because we don't, because we temper what we say.
yeah,
And you might get the same if a child's put on ever such a lot of weight. You know, children say things very directly, or children, whether it's weight related, whether it's something visual or different. Mummy, why is that person like that? And we go, shh, got your hand over their mouth. And actually it's just go and talk to them, find out. Do the opposite.
yeah.
So go on.
No, carry on.
Well, just so autism is just one aspect. You're going to find a lot of things, and there's so much online that you can find out. There's some great different things that you can do. So practical strategies around autism, around social communicators: check for understanding, use language that's clear and really easy and precise in different ways. Ask them how they like to be communicated with, and understand that some people won't be able to maintain eye contact with you when you talk to them. So be clear. And sometimes on the extreme end, that can be picture symbols, cards, visualization, lots of things. Now we're going to do this, next we're going to do that. Again, that's a real clarity that's really handy. Warn other people about social interaction as much as you can. Do one activity, encourage that as much as you can. If that person wants to spend time alone, let them, because that's really important. That's okay. If people have very restricted patterns of behavior and work in different ways, don't promise anything that can't be guaranteed. Don't tell them that something is an absolute if they really need routine. Say them that some of this will be changing all the way through, but what I want you to do is come and check with me and I will keep you informed. So that helps too. Or pre-explore the environment. I'm going to walk you through. So for example, like, you know, if you go somewhere really scary like Worlds or NCA or Summit, or, you know, when their warm-up is completely different to ours, and it's like, Jesus, you're queuing here and this is the number structure, and goes the buzzer, and you're going to go here and you're going to do this, or you have to walk all the way through here for Summit and go around here, and there's all these posters and there's too much distraction. Walk them through that first of all. Explain to somebody that this person needs this help, and help doing that. Or take pictures of it, a video, you do a video and say, this is what it looks like. That can really help as well. If so, sensory strategies are slightly different. So you have to look at what makes the child okay or not. So you look at aids for that as well, because athletes will vary as to how they see their senses. So that you've got to think about that. So they might, certain lighting might put them off. So you might be able to say to somebody, can you turn off that massive flood spotlight, please? Or it might be the noise. Could you just turn it down a little bit? Or you give them some kind of ear defender or something. If it's a smell, there's not a lot you can do. Maybe put like a little, some kids will use like, you can buy menthol lipsticks that used to help people cry as actors and actresses, for example, if you can't do it yourself. So something under the nose, like some Vicks or something, to stop a different smell. So it helps do it. So you just got to be very vigilant. And if the child comes off and they hate touch and you think there's an injury, actually, if they hate touch, they might have a very high tolerance for pain because no one ever checks it, because they're not going to moan about it because they don't want to be touched. So you've got to be vigilant when checking for injuries and bits and pieces. And you've got to work out how some of these children have good communication and what that means. And they're all different for different children. So it depends on the sensory system that comes into it as well. Yeah.
Great. So to wrap that up there, Deb, and to try and give it on a like a plan structure, is to have a plan, to be focused on the simplest things, like to keep it simple, and sometimes don't be too focused on that plan. Try and back off a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, if you look up autism, and there's an inclusion spectrum called STEP, you can look at that. So all things you can look up. There's SPELL, which you can look at as well, which is their SPELL framework, which is all about structure, positive approach, I think it is, managing expectations, empathy, how to understand that somebody may not get on with that, looking at low arousal, so everything isn't too high, and links. So that means coaches, you've got to start looking at something, reading around and seeing what you can do. And that makes a real difference. There is a download that you can have that's from the National Autistic Society, which is all about autism, sport and physical activity. It's really easy. It's written by a woman called Amy Webster. That's where I've got most of my information from. That's something I've read many times. There's great books. I think, what's the 2 books? There's one about cats and dogs, something like my cat has autism and my dog has ADHD, because the dog's like, what's next? Squirrel. And the cat is just like, I'm not even engaging. So there's quite a few brilliant little books that you can get as well, that help explain stuff to different people. And just sometimes reading something like that can help. And what a lot of kids with autism won't communicate is feelings. So sometimes I've got feelings cards that I use. Where are you feeling that in your body? So tell me what's happening. I'm not feeling anything. So my tummy's churning a bit. Okay, so you might be a little bit nervous. So it's an education opportunity as such. Teach.
Great. So I hope that has answered our listeners' question. And I'm sure I'll get some feedback on that. If anybody else has any other questions that they'd like me and Deb, or me and another guest to cover, then message me, message Deb. Let's wrap that up there then, Deb.
All right. So I will see you next week.
Yes, you will. Have a great day, Deb.
And you. See you later.
Later. Bye-bye. We're going to wrap that up by saying bye to you, the viewers, and the listeners. I hope that answered our question from our viewer, and I hope they can start implementing things on game day. Thanks again for following the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to Podbean to get the audio, or subscribe to our YouTube. I will bring in new podcasts weekly during this isolation period. Stay safe, stay sane, stay healthy. Ooh, that was a good hook line. Wrap that up there. Much love, peace, signing out. Puzzle pieces.